Hi, everyone, and welcome to our special Pride edition of Artist Insights. I'm Larry Daniels, and I'm one of the co-creators of our Pride Fest this year, celebrating LGBT artists and creators and choreographers. Today, we have Nitsan, who would have been a participant in our festival in the theater, but given the things going on, we had to go virtual, and Nitsan is going to join us from Berlin today to discuss some work in progress that he would have presented in person in the theater and in response to just his time in quarantine. So we're excited to have him join us today, and I hope you all enjoy. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll be answering them for you. So I hope you enjoy.
Hey.
Hi, sweetie.
Did you hear the whole video, or was the sound off?
Well, I'm having a bit of a delay on my end, so I don't want to confuse anyone. What I loved was seeing your through line of it, because I think I've seen these texts in little versions, but we spoke about how you might expand poetry into something performative that we would move through, and I can see that you've just done something extraordinary with that. How has it been?
Yeah, I also haven't changed. There is something about trying to embody the idea of the longing and the idea of the suspending, and something about embodying this suspension and seeing that when it becomes physical, the longing is becoming something else. Yeah, and I think there is, I don't know if you were able to hear, but there is something about reading the whole text out loud that creates a certain rhythm and a certain intimacy and risk with the text, and certain vulnerability that is being shared that is very different than any other experience I had, including following your advice and like hanging on the wall the whole text yesterday and having it kind of rearranged, and then just having it now shared even through this platform just feels so like I feel like I'm growing with it to places I didn't think I would.
I can see it. It's almost like your fragments suddenly unfolded as a story or a narrative, and that the material that comes from the studio, the material that comes from you in an embodied way, working with things like suspension, suddenly moves into the foreground in a completely different way. And I like this experiment that you're making now with the screen. How was moving for the text and then scrolling it becoming part of your research process or creation process?
Scrolling in and out of the text, you mean? Or
yeah, we talked about how we'd move, or how this piece would move on the page, and as if moments that it was moving on the page became scenes and became what you know as an artist who works with the stage.
yeah, it's almost like I felt the choreography of the scrolling, which areas I'm exposing and when am I exposing them. For instance, in the end, it was important for me to keep the very last two words not visible, invisible until the moment of the very end. And I think that ideally, I almost would like to have maybe double or triple the size or the amount of text, and having a much slower reading of it. Yeah, and I cannot not feel that it needs the liveness. There is something about yeah, I think there is something about the internet that does something specific to it, but at the same time, it fills me with fear because I have no clue who's on the other side watching it. So the feel of control, there is something about, even in the audience, even if it's fully dark, you can still have a feeling of the people. and the fact that it's online, it kind of puts it on another feel. I feel like when people would read it on a PDF, I am much more careless than when they hear my voice and when there is a kind of this kind of semi-liveness. So I almost prefer full liveness but no liveness.
I see some notes here about how I'm thinking of two things, but how the audio glitching became something that was emotionally powerful for us to be with you and to have that sense of liveness, but to feel the kind of strain of the technology as we experienced the poetry. And then the other part of that is that your early research process had the audience moving backwards and finding texts as they move backwards, moving into their field of vision. And I wondered if you sort of wanted to connect that experiential way of finding your texts and then this glitchy, strange, emotionally fraught way that we share with you, the digital space.
Yeah, I find it interesting that we are in like a very advanced technological time and still we experience these beautiful glitches. I find that the glitching is actually something that reminds us how much we actually need the physical. So I find the glitches actually so important. And then there is something about the walking backwards that even though I took the text as it was written back and I kind of flipped it and now it's kind of the other way around, I still have the wish to read it from down to up. Even if it's written from up to down in the order of down to up, there is something about the action of scrolling upwards in a text that's supposed to be downwards that attracts me as much as I try to have the video upside down. There is just something about this opposition and trying to look from both perspectives and to kind of as if we would have the whole talk and I would just be giving my back to you. I would do a whole different experience for both of us, obviously. And maybe closer to this idea of the queerness that we have been touching.
We talked about starting with an idea of a queerness that wasn't invented yet or that didn't have a definition from the way that you moved through that language in your writing. Has that remained a direction for you?
Definitely. I think that first of all, I'm trying to use the word homosexual because it's more sharp, it's more spicy, it's tough, it's rough. And it's the word that I had to encounter earlier in my life. I feel like there is something with the word queer that is softer. And then in my own thinking about I thought about it today. There is something common with different queer ways of living. Some are more privileged than others, for sure, and some are easier than others, depending on so many geographical questions and many other questions. I'm still unsure about remaking the word queer itself, and I'm thinking that I'm trying to go closer to the embodied experience of what does it mean for me. Like wearing this dance belt, this tongue on my shoulder, or like looking at the object that I'm curious about and finding this specific relationship that I encounter with them and that I'm curious about to consider, and maybe finding what does, instead of just saying queerness, seeing what does queerness does to me and what do I do to it. Yeah.
You also explored family in this in a way that was really powerful, and that you weren't sure where those stories lived in the text, whether they came towards the front or whether they would sort of emerge out of your voice over time. How did you begin to find where excavating family story related to where you are now and where you've been living and how you've been finding a way through with writing.
I think that what I'm finding helpful is coming from such a place as Israel, where family plays such a big role of the everyday living, in terms of the amount of dinners that are common and the amount of holidays and the connection and proximity of, even if you live in a different city, it tends to be something between half an hour to an hour away. And living further abroad helps gaining perspective on it, and then kind of I'm finding that my imaginary relationship to lovers and to other peoples that are in my life and enter inside this you and I, this kind of container of the you and I. And somehow I think that what I'm trying to do is keeping the you and I sealed, and at times I allow it to leak. So maybe that's first time that I keep writing, the container is leaking and I'm not really sure what I meant. And maybe you're helping me gating that the container might be the you and the I, and then what is leaking is the fact that I can't keep it for myself. I tend to constantly give clues of who are those you and I's, and how my family, in my imaginary my thoughts about them, because when I'm not alongside them in proximity, and then the lovers or the people that I'm speaking about also in a way that is more magical or more fantastical, they kind of find commons, and they find a thread in a story that is merging.
That's stunning. Another part of this work that you're creating is work with images. And I can't help think of those, my eyes, my eyes, my eyes. I think we all feel that, even, now I'm so conscious of my bodily reaction to the screens. But you had a whole process of creating the hailing hands, these different moments, and then finding the relationship between text and image. And how does that kind of emerging of still image and movement of the page start to become a logic that's maybe theatrical or dramaturgical or choreographic?
Yeah, that's something that, yeah, I'm a visual person, so um, sometimes I feel like I'm preferring the way of the text is laid on the paper rather than how it makes sense to read it. So I'm very careful of the way that the images, and I find that I'm choosing specific pages for the image, and then I read the text and make sure it makes sense. And so I'm trying to detach that, and I'm finding that just calling it a choreographic text um, is something that appeals to me, is something that allows me to like relax in some way.
Yeah.
Um, I don't even know why. And then seeing that allowing that scrolling movement happen actually shows me that there is movement inside of that stillness, even of the words, of the gaps between the words, of the rhythm. And seeing how today felt more performative, it's kind of bringing me closer to the installations I'm thinking of, and to the other three-dimensional things, because I feel like this two-dimensional form today was felt in my body more three-dimensional in terms of the anxiety I felt than maybe the whole COVID time. So so maybe that's how it's choreographic. Yeah.
Well, that I like this thinking about the three-dimensional, because there are objects too in what we're seeing in terms of images. So you did have a piece that you made with a silicone skin that you performed in Germany earlier this year. And there are other pieces that are parts of installations and so on. And this is a process for you writing through what are in fact performances. Um, what's your relationship between that performing body and the traces that you find in the text that we may see as an image, or we may see as a movement image or a choreographic text?
Yeah, I would just say that Manuela Benaim made this she was replicating my skin as a silicone skin that created this perspective of my own skin. And I think that this afterlife almost of the pieces that is creating a new life is something that is it's strange, it's allowing, mainly I would just say maybe that word, that it's allowing. And I'm thinking about objects lately, and I'm thinking that it's something like a door. It's like finding more doors to enter through rather than to decide that it has to be a process that is embodied, but knowing that even my words are embodied and they're going to be embodied differently. So maybe it's more about transmitting movements, actually writing on paper, because someone else is going to perceive it and going to have it. So maybe it's actually more like, not like a class, but there is maybe more similarity with the guidance and the kind of feeling that there is an accompaniment. Maybe.
I like you talking about finding a way to be transmitting movement, but also to think of that as this shared space of a class or a movement class rather than saying a performance space or a theater. And so for you, where are you locating that dancing body in your writing and creation process?
Exactly, in between, always in between. Yeah, I don't think of it. I think that this specific text feels more closer maybe to a performance or to a choreography rather than a traditional class. But I think that it has to do with the dependency, because it does not exist without the participator, without the person to read or to watch it. So then there is maybe something with it being closer to what we're having now. It maybe feels more like a dialogue with the I and you, and the I and you of the reader and I. Yeah.
You started at one point writing poems to another, and in each case, that other was something else, and it wasn't necessarily human. It might be anxiety or time or worry. And I'm just wondering what it meant to try to cohere I and you, knowing that it had been this like beautiful way of addressing things in the world that you were experiencing, but that was fluid and that changed over time.
There was something with this direct relationship to abstract means that allowed me to understand them and re-understand them. So writing every day for a couple of months letters to time, hey time, just kind of gave shape to time in a way, or gave a possibility to encounter time in a way that I wouldn't differently. Um, and I think especially the move from time writing back to me, time writing anytime. So I think that what really helped is that shift for inventing what would time tell me. So we have empathy for one another. So I think it helped me by having empathy, yeah, to other encounters, to have empathy towards myself, maybe.
Wow. It's needed for writing
Yeah.
and for making that empathy towards yourself. And it's maybe particularly hard with these moments of quarantine and of being far from others. Um, and have you felt that writing has transformed that experience?
Um, I think at times of loneliness, it brought me. I had a company in a way. Yeah.
Also,
Uh,
fabulation or creation.
yeah.
So we're pretty close to the time that we talked about giving ourselves, so to speak, with this idea
Yeah.
of writing to time.
Thank you
Do you
so
have
much.
a thought or a question? Thank you so much for inviting me to see this
Any
work.
thought or question? if anyone wants to view that without the glitching that I imagine, just send me a message and so on. And I just it was so nice to be invited by this 14th Street Y and to have you, VK, asking those great questions. It's super helpful in the process.
And what are you doing next with it? Do you know yet?
I think I want to keep on. I want to keep on writing and maybe having more other embodiments of that on that video. So searching for other ways of suspending physically. So
Okay.
kind of stretching both of them.
All right. So we'll wait to see what you do with suspending physically as a theatrical choreographic event. And thank you for writing through this time, this really challenging time, and writing to time in a really challenging time. And thank you for inviting me. And yes, I would love myself to see this without the glitches, but the glitches really got me too.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks. Welcome to Longing to Suspend. If you're lost, I will catch you. As this is written during COVID crisis, I realize that we are two, you and I, but here I alternate through variations of you and variations of eyes, variations of you, variations of I. I will be waiting. You told me, imagine magic, fantasy, despair. I told you, and I repeated, who wants to join me? Who will sing with me? You said, this is everything but about time. I answered, now I only fly in my dreams. You keep on saying, don't control, don't explain. This offering is not an effort. It is a borrowing of my light, of my dust. Dust, a little treasure, you were following me. Then you gave up, you little bright light. A scratch in my memories, a beam of stars. Starting to discover my molecules. I truly don't know what's cruel in you. Forget all those moments, oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my. I used to read in people's coffee, especially in the traces of coffee. I used to simply tell them what I see. Now, a general word that tells nothing. I want to read the clouds for people. I started by walking backwards, reading a list of words. In a small alley, people passed by, looking at me strangely. I knew that I had to continue. It felt familiar, foreigner, experiencing humiliation, manifesting my awkwardness. That's where I belong, in this gesture, searching for some truth. Back there is an entrance where I'm joining you. I'm breathing with you, blinking with you, writing and reading with you. This is a text or a sight or a dedication. Hold my hand as I am longing to suspend in your wild dreams. I'm a thought, not your thought, neither mine. You said, I'm still the same stupid, I'm still same, I'm still the same stupid kid as I was back then. Love and vibes of destruction and direction to you. You also said that you drank a whole bottle of wine in the shower. You changed your name for me, wearing flip-flops in the snow, sharing a single bed with a homosexual. I adored you. I sent you a very similar postcard. I brought you to tears. I told you again that I love you. The postcard was blue, but looked a bit like that. As the unknown is licking, I managed to cry yesterday. I'm confronting the value of love, the value of investing love, investing time, being trapped in love. Or was it a gesture of magic? I won't type question mark. Love studies. It does. Thanks God. Thanks God. We're trying to breathe, but we're licking a effect. Take me or leave me, I'm yours. On billboards, pavements, under the trees, and we decided to snore. We are unsure why. Inhale, snore, exhale heavily. We sat on the chairs. We were trying to hold the paper, to put on the shoes. We sang while shaking. Those fake dollars are lying. I started sewing them earlier, I promise. They are asking how to be. Hey anxiety, you're on and off like acknowledgement, like pearls that I used to wear and take off until I lost. Guess where? In Athens. Coincidence? Questioning all, questioning nothing, during those times. I tend to understand more of what I'm leaning away from than what I'm leaning towards. I no longer sense the sense of knowing what I sound like, what you want to hear or what you want me to sound like. Dislocating knowledge, an absurd, an episode, a phrase, a sentence. Right here, right, wrong, left, over. I promise you one thing. Can your time love? Writing is touching, as writing is being in touch. Writing is getting rid of this body. Writing is allowing oppositions to merge. Writing is a wishful thought. Writing is possibility to disappear and appear otherwise. Writing as matters with substance and voice. As voice with ink and gap and tradition, yet hope for change. Writing as you both ask me to, and I'm not sure that I can. Writing as typing, as making mark, as shifting, as rotating, as curving, as unpointing, as letting you go, as you said, in the big open sky. In front of self. No, not confronting, nor hiding, more like teasing, your white socks and my traveling gaze. You are important, or more like, you became important lately. I'm a coward, or more like, I'm learning to not be one. This is getting awkward and I left. And so, Allen Ginsberg said, I write because poetry can reveal my thoughts, cure my paranoia, also others people's paranoia. I write poetry because my genes and chromosomes fall in love with young men, not young women. I write poetry because I want to be alone and want to talk to people. I write poetry, first thought, best thought, always. I write poetry because my mind contradicts itself 1 minute in New York, next minute the Dinaric Alps. I write poetry because my head contains 10,000 thoughts. I write poetry because no reason, no because. I write poetry because it's the best way to say everything in mind within 6 minutes or a lifetime. Foucault Radio said, practicing intuition as a political act, continuous bodying, doing, thinking, feeling. Hey you, can, or how can I even start writing to you? Perhaps it has to do with me creating a mode of returning. You somewhat recur here in Missouri, so why am I writing? What am I trying to say? I thought of putting you in focus and words, perhaps to apologize that in Rome I wasn't so warm, and that your image lying naked with a full beard in Tel Aviv is still stuck in my head when I think of you. I guess that I truly do wish to reunite with you, even for one night. What for? To prove what? Forget all those words, all my. Situated, objects of movement, screaming, I will be waiting as a prayer to time, making shoes from piles of books as a way to test the materiality of knowledge, replicating skin as a way to gain perspective from one's own container, a suit of my skin, putting on and taking off. Now we're together in a club. I'm in my bubble, naked or wearing velvet floral pants. You are with that white shirt with V-neck and hairy chest. This is semi-dangerous, semi-erotic, semi-glorious. Our senses are heightened naturally. This is a stream that came to life, or life that came to dream. My fake money is all over the room. I'm reading from right to left. You're reading from left to right, or not at all. I don't fully control this. You might think that I humiliate myself. Next chapter. Taking the studio into the world. I'm sitting in my armchair in the bedroom. The armchair got no arms. It's COVID time, even if restaurants are back to work. And I'm thinking of you, the studio, the container to feel comfortable, where you will witness my absence, a visit that is not possible now. Where I understand why I'm doing this, where I think of fantasy about closeness or intimacy, what is erotic and not sensual. Starting to question, or was it what is erotic and not sexual? Unsure. Starting to question, feel free to never ever answer. Hey there, ask you to bear with me just a little further, thank you. Returning to dreams, returning to earning. Hey eyes, I know, you've been looking at screens all day. I apologize. Please forgive me. I'm trying my best. Am I or you? Okay, confusion. Attempt to get better. Honesty when lying. Can eyes be unhonest? Make a work that is dealing with language, but not trying to fix or understand. It's for right now, not forever, everywhere, everyone. Just the time when it is. Temporary, self-forgiving, agreeing in the encounter. I collected your eyes and assembled them on my bubble in order to gain more perspective. My eyes, 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 my eyes. It was a love from first sight. We met in my bedroom, and we still do. I took a bath. I visited almost too often. We are curving the edges of ourselves in order to be together. We are also located, bridges and walls, walls and bridges, distance, proximity. As I sit on the bridge in Berlin, almost as a homeless in the hippie neighborhood, people look at me strangely. I finished reading Sarah Ahmed's Queer Phenomenology, and I'm thinking about objects, encounters, orientations. I live right now close to a small bridge that used to be split by the Berlin Wall, that fell 31 years ago. The wall stood a couple hundred meters from where I live now. I think about my proximity to walls. I used to pass By the wall by road number 443 on the way to Jerusalem every day, as I drove on the bus from my home to high school and back. There is a huge difference between walls and bridges. In Berlin, bridges are used for meeting, as a place to pause and catch the sun. I want to be a bridge, a place to stay. We're in the car driving. There are hills and the car is jumping, unlanding. I'm standing with Mama and Father Pete. Mama Pete showed me how to feed the cows, like my other granddad did in the kibbutz. Oh wait, it was my great-granddad. Baking is a mode of surviving. Sweets at night is a thing in my family. Yes, he was saved, thanks to his intuition and guts. It's 49 past midnight, May 21st, 2020. I'm in our kitchen in Berlin, baking brownies with tahini, and thinking about this same great-granddad that ran away from home at the age of 14 to study baking, as he had guts that something bad is about to come. He was right about the Holocaust. He survived. The rest of my family, was too late and didn't. Homosexual, a spit. I stepped out of the dance class. I was probably around 12 or 13 years old. Who remembers? There was a bunch of kids around my age or a little older. They spitted at my face and called me faggot or homosexual. I ran away, escaped as fast as I could. They ran down the hill, but didn't catch me. That's when I started searching. What does faggot or homosexual mean? Chapter number. I will be waiting time after time, time after time, time after time, time to unbuild foundations over this page. Hey time, I lost you. Hey time, I'm kind of tired now. You're sweet. Call me in another day, please. Why aren't you more forgiving? You all changed. All of a sudden. It's hard for me to recognize you. You are not who you are. You were. Perhaps I still am who I am. Hey time, did you miss me? It's been a long and kind of weird night. I guess a muscular one. I wish to be clever, or at least beyond my loneliness. Hey time, it's been a while. Hey time, I did have fun, yet a normative one. I was with you. I was born with the middle name Avraham, following my grandfather whom I never met. I returned to Germany after him. He was born in Germany with the name Adolf that he changed to Avraham after he escaped during the Holocaust. He was a historian. He researched the conditions that brought to the start of the Second World War. I am interested in my queer ancestors and history. I believe that human beings are irrational, such as the history, and I tend to be as moldable and adjustable as I can in order to survive. My grandfather and I have different modes of facing life, yet we both search for ways to survive. I believe like most human beings. What if I would move away from surviving and closer to acknowledging, connecting, and reaching common sharings? Capturing the sense of possibility, of refusal, untied promises, unfixed thought, flexible desire. This was me and you. We were doing it in the middle of a shopping mall, doing it in the park in Montpellier, doing it under my Airbnb apartment. Don't worry, it did not take place, because COVID did. You asked, where is the next paycheck coming from? Where do you land? I said, how often do you follow your rituals? It's an issue. How well do you stay silent? It's an issue. How close are you to your mom? It's an issue. How do you perceive reality? It's an issue. Hey, issue, you're sweet, but listen. The world is falling apart. I insist that I'm safe, that I is we, that we move closer to where ideas live. Our multiple conditions in the middle of the street are casual danger. They are not about arrival, they are about invading the now, in times of common unknown, our beloved rapture. Questions are offerings, our movements, our cycle. You offered, I waited. then spoke about the materiality of love. When we make love, we do not speak. When we make love, we betray what we shall do and hone into. When we make love, we close the lights. We make love to forget and remember, make love to undo, to make love to refuse. Love situated between us, away from needs, in pleasure of gravity, body, lips, skin, you, the love.